All right, guys, let's talk about the Choi bar. I'll start with a story. My memory's terrible, smoking too much weed, but I'll do my best to give this justice. There's a Korean grappler called Choi Bon Choi, and he used to hit this armbar all the time, and so it's called the Choi bar. As far as I know, he was big 2012, 2013, around that time. He first came to our attention because he armbarred Lachlan Giles. But we had seen him, and I heard of him, that he had visited Atos, and he'd hit this armbar quite a few times at Atos, even on some of the bigger names. So obviously it has some utility there. He would mostly do it in the gi, but it would obviously work no gi as well, based on how strong you can establish this grip. Let's talk about some little tricks I do to set up the grip, and we can also talk about then how we control with that grip, because it looks very similar to like a shoulder crunch Sumigaeshi style grip or a Udigatami grip, but it's just a bit higher up on the shoulder. So something to think about is when we take this grip, like most things, I don't want Tyler's elbow close to his body. If we were to take the grip, I should show you what the grip is first. It's going to be like so. It's going to be basically a underhook, thumb pointed back towards you, and the other one's like we're karate chop on the shoulder, and we catch it here. And I've got backwards tension, I'm pinching my elbows together. So you can see it's very similar to a shoulder crunch Sumigaeshi. But for me to keep control over this, I want Tyler's elbow a little wide. And if it's a little wide, it's obviously going to be easy for us to get. And you can see I'm keeping everything tight, but I'm pulling his elbow up a little bit. If Tyler's elbow's close to his body here and I secure it, it's much easier for him to rip this out or re-pummel or whatever. So for me to establish it, and we don't need to just do this from knee shield. Sometimes I'll even do it when I'm playing some form of open guard here, or even if Tyler's standing up above me here and he starts leaving a hand around my leg position here. Obviously we could reach straight for it, but if I reach like this, Tyler's going to pull his arm away. So what I'll do is I'll hit the wrist and I'll try to create a rotation out. And I'll also hit a shallow underhook here. And you can see now we created a wedge around each side of his elbow. If Tyler tries to pull that out, very difficult. And really, potentially, we could place the foot on the hip and start throwing into arm bars in this position here. But when we talk about it in the context of a knee shield here, if we're playing here, I'll hit the same grip and then upgrade to a much stronger grip, right? Again, this is a solid grip. If Tyler, you can see how my forearm tracks against Tyler's forearm. It's basically mirroring him as we throw it. You can see it's created a wedge on either side of his elbow here. It's tough for Tyler to rip this out. Although, obviously, an open hand grip isn't going to be as strong as a closed hand grip like this. But you can see how by slapping that elbow wide, it gives us a better ability to catch a stronger grip on the shoulder here. So now if Tyler's trying to rip his arm out, it's very tough. And really, what he does when he tries to rip it out is he pulls himself in such a manner that it makes the armbar easier because he's trying to rip his shoulder out in this direction towards my feet. And obviously we're going to get into how to finish the armbar, but this is where it is. The little arm catch I'm doing, and again, you guys don't need to do it. You can do it from any sort of guard position here, is a hit the wrist and we pull their elbow towards us before we secure it. So you can see here, I've got a foot on the hip, so I could push Tyler away, catch it. It's actually very similar to something you can do while you're passing. When we're trying to pass someone's guard here and they're framing against us here, we can hit the same mechanism. So I can smack his elbow in his wrist and bring my chest over the top to turn his frame into an underhook, because this frame is very, very annoying here. So obviously I'll just cover it briefly, but if we're framing here, we want to hit the same thing. We're hitting the elbow and the wrist. And we can turn that into potentially front head attacks there. So again, it's a mechanism that you'll see in other places, not just to set up arm bars, but we can use it in passing too to beat frames. So again, we hit the elbow and the wrist, and we can secure this tight grip here before upgrading. We can also, but it won't be as effective, if Tyler's constantly reaching for my head, we can pummel our shoulder inside here. So if I reach here, I've got no grip at all. Tyler rips his arm out. But if he keeps grabbing my head, I want to pummel shoulder inside, and now we can secure this shoulder here. So again, that's something I've sort of borrowed from wrestling. If Tyler has the collar tie here, as long as we can get our shoulder inside, we can secure an underhook. So it's the same mechanism of action from here. He's basically got a collar tie here. And so long as his elbow's inside, my offense is weak. So we can throw our shoulder inside to secure these grips. And again, I want you to play around with this, feel the control here as we're pulling down, and I can use my knee in either the far shoulder. So now if Tyler's trying to move here, he can't go forward, he can't go backwards, he can't rip his shoulder out. Very tough for him to play. We're going to get into the armbar, but we can also keep it on this side as well. Tyler's trying to pull his arm out. Very difficult here. He created a strong attachment to this limb. We're basically going all in on this grip. You can see ultimately if my knee comes to this side, we've got 3 parts of our 4 limbs fully committed to attacking this arm. But just again, wherever we are, if someone ever grabs your head, Tyler's standing up passing, he's reaching for my head. So long as that shoulder comes inside, or so long as we can effectively flare an elbow, we can start attacking arm bars or choi bars on this side. So guys, that's just the basic gripping sequence. Next, we're going to cover how we can use that grip to hit the actual choi bar. All right, we covered the gripping sequences. Let's talk about how to finish the choi bar. Choi bar looks, I would say it looks like a simple technique. It looks pretty straightforward, but this is one of those ones where there's some subtle details about how we can apply pressure to the shoulder to rotate the thumb in the direction of the arm bar. And that's something I don't think you can see when you see it hit in a live match. So let's talk about it now. So we've secured our grip, right? Whether that be Tyler grabbing my head and me pummeling the shoulder inside, and we've secured our grip. So again, obviously, if Tyler was retarded and he wasn't monitoring my right leg, we could just take the leg out and throw it over the top in a traditional manner. This is the traditional way you'd see a lot of the choi bars occur, but given that Tyler isn't retarded, and your training partners probably aren't either, they're going to be monitoring this leg. So we're going to have to do the same thing we did with the Kimura, and that is to bring the knee inside here. So obviously if your training partner is very persistent here, you're going to have to use your elbow to make a bit of space to get that knee inside. But the whole time you're practicing this sequence, I want your training partner to lightly test your grips. Obviously, if I start changing my elbow positioning to get this knee in and it's loose and Tyler just rips his arm out, obviously we've sacrificed the wedge to get our knee in position. So you have to be able to keep the correct pressure behind the shoulder so that when we get to this side, now Tyler can't pull his arm out. And if you can see, I'm basically resting the inside grip of the choi bar grip against my knee for extra friction and sort of to create a reinforced wedge here. So now when it's go time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to push Tyler's head away to get my leg on top. And we're momentarily heavy here. But the next transition is the most important part of this whole sequence of techniques. And that is we're going to let go of the choi bar grip and we're going to throw our leg as deep and as heavy as we can here. And then I reinforce it on my own quad here. And you can see I'm exaggerating this movement, but this is exactly how I would do it if we were rolling or in a competition. Because what it does, it rotates Tyler's thumb in the direction we want for an armbar. And obviously, if my hips are coming forward to apply pressure to the armbar, we want Tyler's thumb facing the same direction. If I throw it loose, Tyler can turn his thumb back to me and pull his arm out. And obviously it goes straight into counterattacks. So what we do from this position is we throw our hand to our quad and our quad to our hands. And I'm very, very heavy with my inner thigh on the shoulder. So now Tyler cannot rotate his wrist. Tyler's trying to rotate his wrist here. There's not a lot going on. And again, it's not going to buy us an endless amount of time, but it's going to give us enough time to create this transition here, to catch the thumb. Once we have the thumb, we can let go of our quad and reinforce the thumb grip and apply that back heel pressure behind his armpit, just like we did with the Kimura grip armbar. And now for us to get the finish, we're going to bring, because I'm attacking his right arm, I'm going to bring his right elbow to my right hip and his right wrist to my right shoulder. I wouldn't finish down here. No matter how much I extend, apply hip pressure, it's going to be weak. We need to place it into our top hip here. So I'm pulling his right elbow to the right hip and his right wrist to my shoulder here. And that's how we create the break. So here, I'm literally just pulling it. There's no hip pressure here and we're already getting the tap. So obviously we could apply significant hip pressure here. And just for my ability to move, if Tyler lifts his leg so you guys got clear vision here, I would take this out and go foot to foot, because as Tyler rolls to counter, it places my feet in perfect position behind his head to, again, the right, 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 left, left, left principle, start turning in to apply the break. If, as we're turning, he starts to come up, I'll use weight on top of the head to prevent him coming up. If there's only one detail you take out of this transition, I want it to be the axing down pressure with the leg that's going to rotate his wrist in the correct direction, right? So we got under the armpit, we secure a tight grip, I'm pulling it in tight, I can make space with my elbow to sneak my knee in, and we reinforce this grip against our leg here. You can see Tyler's trying to rip his arm out, it's wedged in there. I push my knee into his head, and we throw this grip super deep. So you can see how it's forced rotation in his wrist. So you can even break it down to this small sequence here. And we're actually creating that perfect thumb grip we want here. So we had the grip connected. When it's go time, hand goes to quad, quad goes to hand. I'm very heavy with my inner thigh. We secure the grip and we place it to our top hip. Again, here, very tough for me to get a break. Chances are Tyler, as I try to apply it to the wrong hip, will turn into me. So when we create this grip, I want to immediately pull it to top hip. And now when Tyler begins to roll, we get that perfect positioning behind the head and turn to our inside hip. And then if I feel like I'm not adequately controlling him, to prevent him sitting up. Because what Tyler could do to counter this position is if he were to sit up and control the inside knee and bring his head inside, he can counter our position here. So what we want to do is, if we do feel that, I throw my secondary leg over the head to prevent him sitting up. However, if we do miss this and he starts to sit up, we want to place the hand under our armpit and we'll generate a strong break from here. Tyler starts to come up and we get that tap. However, if we're going for it traditionally and Tyler pushes the knee past, gets his head in front of it, obviously we're screwed here. We're not going to get the finish. So one more time, we'll try this angle. We got our Choi bar grip. We bring our knee across. I push his head away with my knee to make space. And I throw this grip super deep. And you can see this pressure has turned his thumb in a direction in which we can catch it. So I have a pit stop here, grab the thumb. Once I'm confident I've got the thumb, then I grab it with my second hand, back heel with both feet. We either get the tap here by lifting it into our right hip here because we're attacking the right arm. If Tyler reacts, which he's going to do, it's going to be a roll. Feet behind the head, and we turn in to get the break, or we could apply the foot over the head. But what I want you to remember is to always keep this foot behind the head, because that's going to prevent the hitchhiker. If both feet are on the other side, Tyler has a good chance to hitchhike around. We'll cover the finishes for the arm bars in more detail later. We'll try to turn it into some circular drills so that you can practice your ability to hold an arm, while your training partners can also get practice at escaping and finding opportunities to create movement in those transitions. I was going to throw this in later, but just because my memory's terrible and I'll probably forget to throw it in later, let's talk about, because we've been touching on arm bars in the submission section from the Kimura and from the Choi bar section. We'll talk about how we train arm bars at the B team. And that's basically, you should always allow your training partner time to tap. There's absolutely no reason for me to have to apply an arm bar to completion on Tyler. That is, of course, unless Tyler has not been doing enough work lately. Then, by all means, I'm going to try to pop his elbow. But whenever I tap an arm, whenever I get an arm bar, I bring it to full extension, because a lot of people will say they have this false idea that they apply an arm bar on someone and the guy escapes the arm bar in the gym and they go, oh, you just got out because I didn't apply the arm bar. I didn't try to break your arm. And then they get super frustrated. And the next time they get the guy in an arm bar, they legitimately might try to break their arm or pop it. And that might occur. Someone might get hurt. Or potentially what happens is they try to apply the arm bar even harder next time and the guy gets out again. And then in their head, they have to realize that they really don't know how to apply arm bars correctly. It's the same with heel hooks. It's like when I was learning heel hooks way back, like 2015, 2016, I thought I knew how to break a leg until it came to competition where someone was psychotic enough to actually not tap once I closed the grip around the heel, and they'd slip out. And basically in that moment, I realized I didn't have the breaking mechanics on a heel hook and that I needed to develop them further. I had a huge void in my skill set because every time I was in the gym and I locked up a grip on a heel hook, a guy would tap. So I had this false assumption that I knew how to break someone's leg in a heel hook. And a lot of people, even really experienced black belts, and even me, true, until I was a black belt, I really didn't know how to properly apply arm bars or properly how to train with them to develop those skills. And that is offensively and defensively. So if I have Tyler in an arm bar here, so on his back, a lot of the way people train arm bars is they'll lock it up and say Tyler's got his grips connected. They might hit a grip away, and the second they get in here, Tyler's tapping. And I walk away from that exchange thinking, yeah, I know how to do an arm bar. But really, when push comes to shove and it's in a competition, I actually likely don't know how to do an arm bar. And that's become very evident in EBI overtime. Because their training partners tap too early to submissions, because they're too competitive with each other, and because they honestly don't trust their training partner's not going to hurt them, they go into EBI competition unprepared. Obviously, a famous example of me and doing that with Gordon is that, like, I'd never trained how to control someone at full extension. I never trained how to properly break someone at full extension. So I had that false assumption I knew how to do it. And because in training, we train that way, just exactly as we did there. I stripped the grip. Oh, of course I know how to finish an arm bar. We wouldn't train those late stage attacks and defenses, when really, this is the way we should be training here, right? I strip the grip, and let's say Tyler does do nothing. I bring it down, and I try to control it for 3 seconds. I can control it. So we count that as a tap. Really, the way we should be training is I strip the grip. Tyler tries to do a hitchhiker. It ain't there. He tries to sit up. It ain't there. So Tyler goes, oh shit, I can't actually move. And he taps. Now we're both discovering things about this position that we wouldn't have covered had we not trained this way. Tyler knows I'm not going to break his arm. So he knows to not freak out as I'm pulling this arm down. He has that comfort. And because he has that comfort, he can start the hitchhiker. If he starts the hitchhiker and it works, that's not because I didn't break his arm. That's because I don't adequately know how to control it. If we face this way. So the way things get developed, such as hooking under the head, if Tyler tries to hitchhiker now, he really goes for the hitchhiker, but he can't turn over his shoulder because I've created a wedge under his head. Now we've developed a way to block the hitchhiker without Tyler endangering his arm or without me being a dick and actually trying to pop it. And then obviously Tyler tries to hitchhiker, it's not there, and he goes, oh shit, what if I sit up? And he sits up because he knows I'm not going to injure him. And now we've developed this exchange where Tyler's been able to beat the hitchhiker and sit up. Sorry, beat the armbar. So he's gone for one escape. The first time it worked, we adapted our training. He's gone for the same escape again, It didn't work, so he sits up. Basically, the two best armbar escapes from a fully extended, you're going to hitchhike or you're going to sit up. We're now going through the motion of where Tyler's further developing his escapes and I'm further developing my controls. And this is how every armbar should occur in the gym. You should have faith that your training partner is not going to injure you. If you don't have faith that your training partner is not going to injure you, it's probably a terrible training partner, or maybe you guys haven't discussed it previous, but it should be discussed. And those are the guys that you should train with to really develop high-level competition. Basically, the longer an armbar sequence goes prior to completion or escape, the better both of you are. And the more often those long sequences happen, the better both of you are going to get. So it can keep going, right? So let's look at it again. So I secure the armbar on Tyler. He tries a hitchhiker, doesn't work. He sits up. And now I develop counters such as foot to foot. And we roll through. And Tyler rolls through again. This time I block the head. And I sit him back down and he goes for a hitchhiker. And I throw both feet to the other side. And you can see we're still getting braking pressure here. But I don't need to break Tyler's arm. Tyler feels that the direction he was heading isn't working. So he does a forward roll again. And now you can see he could sit up here. And now my feet are out of position. If he backwards rolls to where we were, my feet are in the correct position to control him and apply braking pressure. So he forward rolls through. So now, because my feet are out of position, I have to change him again. And maybe we throw both feet to this side, but he still has the ability to sit up, and we keep cycling through these exchanges. And that way Tyler's defense improves and my control improves. Because if I can't control someone's arm without breaking it, I actually don't know how to do an armbar. Sure, you can armbar most people, but obviously we're trying to do jiu-jitsu to understand these techniques and be able to apply them at a higher level. So we have to assume in competition, your opponents are going to give strong escape attempts, high risk, late stage attempts. That's why there's so many injuries in the sport. But typically the guys that get injured are the guys that go for a late stage escape that have never trained a late stage escape. And although they might get out, they might take injuries in the process. And the only way to get good at that late stage part of jiu-jitsu is to have training partners you trust that'll test these gray areas with you. So obviously, you need to find training partners. You need to, if you're an instructor, you need to set the rule. No one's elbow should ever be popped in the gym. There's no way that Tyler can move to pop his own elbow in an armbar, realistically, unless I'm sort of being a dick about it. I want to bring, say I've got his right arm, I want to bring it to the right hip, right shoulder, and then we want to sequence it out from there. They should always have a chance to escape. And if you're always ahead of the curve of your training partner's escapes, and you guys have had these scrambles where an armbar takes you maybe 5-10 seconds to properly control him, but you do control him and they tap, when it rolls around to competition time, whether that be you catch a guy in an armbar in a regulation period of a match, or say you do EBI and it goes to overtime, say in overtime, now you don't just need to rely on this as your defensive position. You can still have confidence if your arm gets extended. And one of the most important things, and it goes true for armbars, it's true for heel hooks. If we come back, I have Tyler in an armbar. One of the things that's most important here is if Tyler's terrified in this position, he's terrified, he's tense. When I do break the grip, his arm's still tense. So say the grip breaks it, but he's resisting it, and he's pulling his hand back towards himself. I will always find the wrist. Because he's so tense, this will never deceive the position. I'll never not know where it is. So think about it again. If he's tense here, and I'm trying to break this grip, and eventually it breaks, and he's resisting in the same direction, it's going to be easy as for me to find this position. But let's say Tyler has a good understanding of late stage defense. And as I'm trying to break his grips, he's tense here, but then he decides to break the grip on his terms. And he throws he throws his elbow and his hand to the wrong side of my body here. And he stays relaxed. If he was tense here, if this arm's tense, I could slide down and find the wrist very, very easily. If the arms are super relaxed here, it's dead. It's like a dead person's arm here. It's hard for me to create a good grip on that arm. And chances are he's already turning out for a hitchhiker here. He keeps going and he escapes. Because the arms relax, it's hard to find. It's the same with a heel hook. If I have someone in a heel hook position and their foot is completely tense and everything's locked down, it's so easy to find the heel. But if it's extended, he's hiding the toes and he's relaxed in this movement and he's basically maintaining this escaping, hiding the heel pressure the whole time, it's much tougher for me to heel hook him. So say you got good heel hooks, you know that when you put someone in a cross archie or a 50-50, and you know they're uncomfortable from there, they're tense, and the submission's easy to find. It's the same from the armbar. Choi bar triangle. Let's talk about we secure the grip, and I mean mainly it's a different option, but like sometimes our leg can get trapped with their secondary arm control. So let's talk about something we can do from this grip. So again, everything's the same stuff. Tyler's grabbing the head. We're gonna pummel the shoulder in and do a bit of a side crunch, secure, and we go down knee in that far shoulder here. So you can see sort of create a bit of a zigzag in Tyler's shoulders. This move is reliant, obviously the armbar is reliant on one of two things. The leg being able to come out and over, or this leg coming inside here. If our training partner's super persistent with the control over this, like so you can see Tyler's really wrapping it up. Say maybe you've hit this move on him 20 times before and he's like, fuck, this is not gonna happen another time, right? So we need another option from here. And a good option is if I can't free my right leg, is I'll place my left foot onto the hip here. And we can use that to reinforce and sort of a counterforce to shoot this triangle. So I can push on the hip and on my right leg is going to shoot knee deep over the top of this shoulder here. So I'm going to extend this leg above the shoulder. So change angle so you can see the right leg control here. So I go knee first. And then we can easily start swinging back to hit a standard front triangle from here. Again, same finishing mechanics. We can either control the head or the shin. We're going to pummel palm away to start cutting this angle here. Knee in front of the shoulder. We retract our legs. And as I lock it up, we're turning that knee in to get the tight triangle. So again, everything's the same here. We get that shoulder pummel. Inside, we secure that Choi bar grip and we anchor it into the hip here. You can see Tyler's so insistent on controlling my second leg. It's tough for me to try to bring this in front. Sometimes you have to actually use your elbow to sort of grind into their face here to bring it across. But obviously, given what Tyler already looks like, it's not a big concern for him to take some damage when defending a submission. But obviously, if someone's a bit better looking, like some of my previous ukes, we could use our elbow to force a bit of pressure into their head so then they might persist in allowing us to bring it across. But again, Tyler's not that man, right? He's willing to take any type of punishment. You guys will have training partners like that as well. So we bring our secondary leg out and we place it on the hip. And again, we're going to extend that right leg through. So Tyler thinks I'm trying to bring the leg around this side, but we're going to go knee first to strip that grip and then cut that angle back to start securing the triangle. We keep our leg that goes up behind the neck, back heeling, toes activated, and we bring our knee in and we can start securing that triangle there where we turn our knee in to secure the tap here. So one more time, paying attention to the left foot this time. We've got our grips here. Tyler's controlling that top foot, so I place the foot on the hip here. And now he still thinks I'm going for the armbar, but we're going to extend and shoot that top leg through, and we're in perfect position to start locking up the triangle out of the Choi bar. So a secondary option is they're persisting and controlling our other leg. Guys, let's talk about setting up triangles, or more specifically, how do we bait the triangle from this position? All throughout my jiu-jitsu career, I've only ever gone for one move at a time. It used to be triangles, it became heel hooks, and now I honestly don't know anymore. But initially, coming up from blue and purple, I would only go for triangles. Literally, that's all I would do. I remember I competed at World Pro as a brown belt in the gi, the last major sort of tournament that I competed in the gi, and basically the only one I ever even achieved a medal at. Up until that point, I would never make the podium. Fucking Dante Leon would beat me, Tommy Langlacker would beat me, and that sort of directed my energy towards no-gi, because although I wasn't winning in no-gi, I would make the podium more consistently. But throughout the gi, I would always play knee shield or Z-guard, grab the far belt and hit triangles. So that World Pro tournament, I think I made it. I got bronze medal in the division, and in the absolute, I think I made it to the semis, losing to Nicholas Marigali. But throughout that series, I hit like 6 triangles in a row, all same setup. Basically, this, again, was the only move I would hit. I'd bait guys into pressuring, shoot the triangle. Why I eventually moved away from Z-guard or knee shield, but I still play it, still has to come up, is because it is dependent upon your training partner, your opponent trying to smash you, trying to crush your guard. That's how we can bait setups and submissions from the knee shield. But really, why it works so well early in my career and why it struggles to work today is because my opponents generally have too much respect for my guard these days, and they approach it with caution. So I have to play a guard style these days because they obviously think my guard's much more dangerous than it is. I play a different, more aggressive style of guards to force reactions. Whereas if you are a lower level guy, blue belt, white belt, and your training partners don't respect you, they just want to crush you, this sort of baiting setups will be the best for you. And the way we can do it is we lure them in. I'm going to show you how we can lure them in with a low knee shield, how they think they're going to crush that position, and we can lure them into a triangle. But this position, again, probably hit this setup a ton early in my career, but again, as people respect this position more, it's hard to force action out of here. It's a reactive guard. So it's a great guard against someone that has no respect for your guard game at all. And you can lure them in, bait them in. But again, if they're overly cautious, it's probably not going to be the guard for you. So let's take a look at how we can sort of set up these positions here, right? So obviously, like we explained in the beginning, we're going to have 2 base positions of knee shield or Z-guard. We got the higher one. This is actually keeping Tyler's weight off of me here. This position makes it hard for Tyler to smash me. This isn't the type of knee shield we'd play to shoot a triangle. Why? Because Tyler cannot effectively beat this in such a way that his weight will be where we want to shoot a triangle. The position we want to play is down here, right in that hip pocket. Obviously, I won't run through the full details again because we do that in the introduction, but I'll briefly touch on it. When we're playing the low knee shield, we want to have a shallow knee here. Again, people think we shouldn't have a shallow knee because our training partners will hit this knee out of the way and then come in and beat our knee shield to create a half guard position. So what they do is they bring this knee cross body here. But what that means is now when Tyler sprawls, my knees touch together. And if he can touch my knees together, he can immobilize them and he can crush it and he can start to pass the guard. And obviously if my knees are together, very hard for me to move and create opportunities here. So we want to place our knee on that outside hip pocket here. And the pressure I want to apply with the top knee is like I'm trying to kick Tyler here, like I'm kicking into him, right? And that creates a little sticking point on this hip here. So if Tyler tries to hit it out of the way, he's fighting the pressure of my kick rather than a pushing pressure. If I'm outside here and I'm pushing into him and he hits it, he beats it every time. If I apply that wrapping kicking pressure here, now when he tries to push on it, he's not going to clear it because obviously unless you're incredibly weak, he's not going to be able to overpower the pressure on my leg with just his upper body. And the reason we have it as well is because it's staggered. When it's staggered like this, it's not knee over knee, and Tyler tries to sprawl on me here, he doesn't generate knee-to-knee pressure like he would if we played that knee deep. When it's deep, he can crush it. That's the purpose of having a shallow hook, a shallow knee shield rather than a deep one. What we're doing with our lower leg here is a deep back heel. So essentially, if you can envision it, we're scissoring our legs. One leg's coming in, the lower leg, and it's pulling back. So I'm back heeling here. Top knee is deep and staggered here. So we're scissoring our legs here, creates a wedge around the hip that can't easily be squashed. The beauty of it, though, and why this works so good in baiting people, is that it looks visually, and to your opponents and training partners, it feels weak enough that they feel like they can smash it. And that's the key detail here to bait triangles. Obviously, a third form of knee shield would be effectively crossing your feet and really reinforcing it. But if Tyler's pressuring into me here, this actually feels very strong. And Tyler probably thinks, I'm not going to just sprawl and crush that. So in that sense, he won't apply the correct pressure to bait us into shooting a triangle. So we want to have that balance. Again, we don't have it high because he can't pressure in here. He has to beat the knee to pressure in. We don't lock our feet because this is actually such a tight wedge around the hip that Tyler will immediately feel that he cannot pressure in. We want to have those legs low and open. We are creating an effective wedge, a scissoring wedge here, but it's still going to make Tyler believe he can come into us here. And that's what's key. So if Tyler feels this, he's going to get low. He's going to start coming into me here. But he still has to beat this knee shield to pass. But because we got that back heeling pressure, he's not easily beating it. And this is the exact posture we want here. So we've got our knee shield, we've got our back heel, and Tyler's pressuring into me here. So the way we can shoot this triangle is we take away the sort of wedge he's on here, right? If I've got this top knee shield in and Tyler's trying to crush me, it's blocked, right? But if he keeps applying consistent pressure and I take it away, he falls forward into me here. That's what we want to use, and that's what we want to take advantage of. The way we shoot this triangle is, it's like I'm applying a knee shield force here and Tyler's got his weight on it, and I take it away. That's the reaction we need to shoot this triangle, right? And again, the way we do that is by having a wedge on his hips that is effective, but not so effective he doesn't believe he can crush it. We need him to believe he can crush it. And that's why this guard works so well if people don't respect your guard. Because if Tyler already thinks fucking Craig's guard's junk, he's already applying an aggressive forward pressure into me. And then pile that on top of, I apply a guard position to him that he doesn't respect either. So we've compounded that, and that is encouraging him to really try to kill us from this position, right? So that's what we're doing with our lower half. What we're doing with the upper half is we're trying to leave this arm trapped around our hip. We want to leave it basically in this position here. We don't want to control it too well. So you'll see sometimes guys will take an overhook here and they'll look to control the wrist. This is the most basic setup from here. Obviously, I could use my knee shield to push into and retract my leg and lock it up. But this sort of control, I mean, it's essentially what Royler Gracie got hit with from Eddie Bravo. This is the most simple, most basic old school triangle around. Obviously, this Eddie hit it on Royler years and years ago, right? But every single person, I would say, blue belt and above, you take an overhook, you take wrist control, they immediately know what's going on, and they'll probably back out and posture out. So again, we don't want to be so obvious with our upper body grips that we've done everything perfect with the lower half, and I take this grip. Because again, it is a reactive guard. I need Tyler's forward pressure. If I'm holding these grips and Tyler moves away, he's not falling into the triangle here. So this is where we need to apply some deception here. And the grips we would use to keep that deception is I'll just rest my hands on his back here. And ultimately, when it's time to shoot the triangle, I switch to a no-thumb cupping grip in the armpit. Because if I'm applying pressure into Tyler and he's applying pressure back into me, and I take that pressure away so that he falls forward, we can pull that armpit to reinforce his forward pressure here. And I can do that in such a way that it's so inconspicuous that Tyler doesn't really think I'm doing anything with this grip here. We can even have our hands rested on the back of the neck here, and when it's time to go, we can pull on the back of the head. So if Tyler postures a little bit and he starts driving weight into me, I could do the same thing by pulling his head. So any sort of grip behind his body here that can help pull him forward. And what I can do with my other hand is rest it in between, ideally, elbow and shoulder here. Because this is going to allow a frame to leave space for the leg to come through. And again, it's deceptive. Tyler doesn't feel the triangle set up here. If I did something as simple as this, now he's aware of the triangle setup and he doesn't put forward pressure into me. And now when we shoot, we don't get the bait. So it's a real bait. We need to encourage forward pressure into us here. But each and every time you can continue to hit the same setup, despite you having hit it on them before, is because each time you take a grip, it could be slightly different. The first time could be armpit, second time could be head. They won't know exactly what you're doing with your hands so as to read the danger immediately. And again, because this looks like such a squashable position, as opposed to something like this, guys truly believe that maybe they messed up their positioning last time and they think, next time, I'm going to smash through this guard. So we want to encourage any sort of attacking pressure from here. So the way we're setting this up is just subtle grips with the upper body. And again, things that look subtle with the lower body. These are all grips that look subtle, but are very, very useful when the right counterforce is delivered. So how do we move our hips so as to free this knee? Because again, everyone will say, oh, how the fuck do you get your leg out of this position here? The way we do that is when we take weight away from the knee shield. So I'm pushing into Tyler. I start to take my lower leg out. I bring it to my chest and I get to the flat of my back. And you can see when I'm on the flat of my back, it's very easy to pummel this leg out. I want you to pay close attention. I'll move slowly. So I'm pushing into Tyler. Tyler's pushing back. He doesn't sense any change in the force of the knee shield, but I use this knee shield to square my hips up to him. And that allows this foot to come free to shoot the triangle. And the beauty of it is Tyler falls into the deepest triangle here. He falls completely forward. Very easy for us to now transition to start shooting the triangle. So look at it from this angle as well. So again, we got our subtle grips here. We've got the knee shield, low bladed, and we're scissoring our legs. We've got the back heel. And I'm applying pressure into Tyler here enough that you can see he thinks he can crush through me here. And when it's time to go, I get to the flat of my back, Tyler falls forward into the pocket, and we can immediately start transitioning to the triangle to get the finish here. So the way we're doing it, right? We've got our subtle grips here. When it's go time, it's going to look awkward because obviously I don't have a training partner to push off. I'm using his forward pressure into my knee to allow me to turn to the flat of my back. And when we're on the flat of our back, this foot has already come free and we can start looking up the triangle. This angle here. So even without the upper body, I'm pushing into Tyler here. He's pushing back into me. Let's pretend I'm controlling his upper body. My knee comes back and we hit the flat of our back here. And you can see he falls perfectly into one arm in, one arm out. Combine that with the fact that we were controlling, framing against the bicep, pulling into the armpit, gives us the easy ability to transition into our finishing position. So one more time here. We've got our knee shield, our low Z. Maybe I'm pushing into Tyler a bit and he's feeling that he wants to push back into me. He's trying to crush me here. So we make our space and we fall to the flat of our back. So I'm pushing into him. The knee shield allows me to get to the flat of my back, allows me to get that one arm in, one arm out position. We secure the far underhook just like we covered previously. We bring our knee in front of the shoulder and we secure the triangle while turning our knee inside. And that's basically how we can bait forward pressure to get the triangle here. We need them to believe that A, they can crush your guard, and B, that you don't have any grips that are potentially a submission danger to them. We want them floating in that pocket, applying pressure to the low knee shield so that when the time's right, we use that pressure to slide our hips back, get to the flat of our back, which will increase our flexibility to lock up the triangle. All right, guys, we're gonna cover the omoplata now. Again, omoplata is not a great submission for nogi in and of itself. It's not to say it's not effective, you can make it work, but it is difficult without the added friction and grips of the gi. So I would say that it is effective, but you just have to be better at it than you do in the gi. But that's not to say you can't utilize it to create an offensive cycle, to chain submissions together that could lead to potentially other upper body submissions. You could turn omoplata into an armbar, a triangle. Obviously, that's very basic stuff. Or we could use it to access the lower body. And I think what's very important to remember is even if the omoplata is not a high percentage submission for you, and even if the leg entries aren't high percentage submissions for you, they're both a great way to sweep people. If you hit an omoplata, the guy can't posture out. What's his next response? Forward roll. We could follow that up and take top position. We hit an omoplata. They posture and put their knee on your chest. We can attack the legs. What's the best way to defend the legs? Hide the heel and turn away. When they do that, if you decide not to pursue the legs, you can pursue top position and end up on top. So there's a way to chain 2 submissions to access a sweep. And it's basically a way to chain from an omoplata, a submission that's not respected in no-gi, as a means to get on top. So let's take a look at how we could set it up. For me, the most common way the omoplata comes up is when I fail to shoot a triangle, but we can shoot an omoplata in and of itself. So if I have Tyler here, just like we previously covered, we can bait this triangle. And one of Tyler's late stage options, where he didn't see it coming until it was too late, but basically still had an opportunity to block this triangle, is he's pressuring into me here. I slide, I get to my back here. Tyler sees the triangle coming and ducks his head. Obviously, we have to react quick here. If I don't control Tyler immediately, he's going to rip his arm out. He's going to pull that arm out and pull his upper body away. However, if you pay attention to how he has to pull his arm away, he's turning and leading with his shoulder, which will give us the opportunity to catch this shoulder. It's going to create a good angle to catch an omoplata. So as Tyler goes to rip it away, I reach for the shoulder firstly with my hands. And you're going to see these grip sequences. You have to realize that I can't just hold Tyler's shoulder like this forever. As he really turns away and it's slippery, he's still going to create some momentum to pull away from us. But as we use a bunch of these little tricks together, what you'll find is that you can create enough stickiness to create submission opportunities, or again, like I was mentioning previously, create sweeping opportunities. So we've landed here. He's dove his head into the ground to prevent the triangle, and he starts to turn away. So I reach through and I grab that shoulder and I start pulling my feet back. Now Tyler has been slowed down, turning away from the omoplata. We can even add another layer, and that is to use our lower leg, our outside leg, to hook that shoulder. Now if Tyler's trying to rip his arm out, it's going to be much more difficult. Again, I won't say that this is going to secure them forever. So you can't just hang out here and chill, because Tyler pulls it a couple of times and then he really explodes. He starts to create further separation there. So we can catch it and try to hook that far arm. So this would be the most, sort of the base position for me when I initially secure this. So what I'm going to look to do is to start sitting up. I'm going to try to get head height here. And I need to get head height and control this inside space, because Tyler's second option, if he goes to turn and he can't turn away, is going to be to look to place this leg on top of my hip here and start to posture out and rip his arm out. So obviously the initial turn was away, but if he can get this knee on top and create a bit of a counterforce posture and rip his head out, that'd be his second option. But again, like I was mentioning previously, if he does place this knee on top, that does give us access to scoop grips, which we can use follow-up attacks. And if he obviously rips his head out high here, he's creating great opportunities for us to start hitting K-guard style entries. But let's look at some ways to finish the omoplata first of all. And like I was saying, is if he tries to pull out and we block that first option, we can start to sit up and reach for this far lat here. We can reach for any sort of grip on the far side of his body here. We can reach for the hip, we can reach for the armpit, or we could reach for Tyler's non-existent lats here, his traps. What a common response is for Tyler here is to forward roll. It's very difficult for me unless I get a meaningful grip with two of my hands here to start attacking a shoulder lock. Unless I get these two grips. Chances are, by the time I'm reaching for that, Tyler already starts to tuck his head and roll. As he rolls, we can obviously let go of the submission and choose to turn it into a sweep. Or if we're really persistent on attacking a submission out of here, we can look to basically take a roll with him. So as I sit up and he starts to roll, I will roll too. And I'll try to catch his leg with my foot here. What this is going to achieve is it's going to lock him in position momentarily so that we can reinforce it with our other leg. Now, as long as I keep his foot elevated, Tyler tries to sit up and pull his arm out. Very, very difficult. And then we can start reaching for that seatbelt style grip I was showing you from the seated position. So I could start to reach through for the far shoulder and the seatbelt here. Once I've got this secure, the leg grip isn't as important to me. Prior to this, the leg grip is very important because if he clears it, he can start to come up and turn away and rip his arm out. When we have this, it locks him down momentarily so that we can reach through for the far shoulder first and then potentially the seatbelt too. To finish from this position, I'm going to open my legs and I'm going to start sitting out. And you can see how it's creating further pressure into his shoulder from this position, right? So again, we had the hook and we controlled the leg here. What this does prevents him exploding out. It allows us to secure this seatbelt grip. And then to finish, we're going to act like we're turning into him here. So I open my legs and I start to sit out. We get that pressure straight away. So you can see we're having to add layers to this position because obviously the increased flexibility involved, increased slipperiness involved in no-gi. So we've gone to shoot our triangle here. They blocked their head through. I immediately grab the shoulder and look to control that far armpit. Another thing we could do from here is if Tyler stands up with his outside leg, we could look to hook it first with our outside foot and second with our inside foot. Now, we've mitigated some of the risk of Tyler's explosions here. Obviously, you can see he's in a pretty horrible position if he were to try to explode here. Tyler's moving around. Very, very difficult for him. It allows us to let go of the shoulder and start sitting up here. We can even finish here. I can extend the boots of both my feet here and we get that tap. Obviously, Tyler's pretty flexible. So if we lose that position and we start to come up, again, if he stays chill here, I would transfer 2 feet to the outside, reach for a seatbelt, and start to lift my hips into them here. But again, we're dealing with higher level training partners, higher level opponents. Chances are, as I'm reaching for this, Tyler will start to roll. So I follow him and I do a forward roll over my inside shoulder too and hook that far leg. We hook it with the outside leg first, reinforce it with the inside. We could hit a body triangle style lock or we could use 2 feet here. Whatever makes you feel comfortable. Let's change that door. Whatever makes you feel comfortable here so that you're free to secure this far shoulder. This is what's most important. Once we have this, we can start to let go and reach through for a seatbelt style grip. But if you feel like you can't reach, this is enough to prevent them turning out. We keep our feet open and I slowly start to walk my hips in. So let's say his arm's out of there. We'll pretend it's in there. Place my foot on the ground and I start walking in this direction to manipulate the shoulder. So let's keep going. We're going to keep demonstrating this until Tyler's shoulder does not work anymore. So obviously I was saying how we could hit this out of shooting a triangle and Tyler stuffs his head to the ground. We could also hit this out of basically, I go for the same movement, but then I just axe this leg over the top. Why this one is harder is because I don't have as ready access to this shoulder as possible. So the second we get it, we want to be sitting up straight away or securing this far armpit here. Secure the far armpit, it's hard for Tyler to turn and rip it out. And if I protect this space inside my hip pocket here, if Tyler tries to step on top, with the other leg, I can try to block it so that I can sit up. Once we sit up, we're reaching for the far side of the body. I'm on my outside hip. I'm trying to turn to the inside hip, just trying to be gentle on this old old man here. So once we land in this position, if they do choose to roll, we're gonna follow them. And we're gonna roll over that inside shoulder. If you've managed to keep control over the far side of the body, you don't need to hook this leg because we've got that control that we were seeking to begin with. So let's come back and look at that one bit again. If we've secured the omoplata and I sit up and I have control over this far side of the body and we both roll, I can hook this arm and get that same finish. So we can place that foot, we can start to hip out, and we can test that flexibility. But again, if we come up and we don't have that control, and Tyler goes to roll, we look to hook the leg straight away. Hook it with the outside, reinforce it with the inside. Really test this position out. Tyler tries to move around. As long as I keep this foot elevated, it's difficult for him. We're not gonna hang out here forever. Tyler's chances are he's gonna hit that foot off and start to look for an opportunity to escape. So we hook it until we get to that far shoulder. Best case scenario, we would use a seatbelt grip to start hipping out. But if we had to, the scoop grip is enough. So again, just a couple of options for hitting the omoplata there from the knee shield position. What I want you to remember is here we're just covering the omoplata submission, but you're gonna see how we can chain it into other attacks. So we know, basically have two reactions of an omoplata. Try to limp arm out, try to posture. Posture leads to great leg attacks. Limp arming out, if we control it adequately, we can sit up and chase their scrambles to either take the sweep or potentially keep following the omoplata and look to finish from top. Welcome back. We had to cut that scene short because Tyler farted on me, but nevertheless, here we are. Let's talk about omoplata to armbar. Let's look at it. So however, whether we're setting it up like we set up the triangle and throwing this in, or whether we're setting it up where Tyler dips his head, what we can do is start to set up an armbar from here. So obviously, Tyler's shoulder is not in danger at this point yet. So really, if he were to roll, he would roll straight into an armbar. If he were to go for it, if he felt like he was in more danger than he was, it would be very easy to hide both feet behind the shoulder, turn both knees up, and catch this armbar. However, most people at such an angle aren't going to try to do that yet. They're not going to roll until they feel that shoulder threat, right? So if Tyler were to roll now, we can look to immediately catch control over the thumb line, and you can see both my feet are hidden behind the inside shoulder here. What's important here is that I rip both knees back to the sky and I apply braking pressure this time against the left, 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 right, right, right principle. I would apply braking pressure out. So I'd be pulling his wrist over my right hip here. And when I say pull, I really do mean we're pulling this as hard as we can here to create that counterforce in their arm here. Why we would do that is because a great way for Tyler to escape this position would be to sit up. So if I tried to place it over that hip here, it's very tough for me to have that ability to follow him here. If he were to try to sit up as I bring it to the other hip, it's actually gonna increase that braking pressure. And while we have this strong need to pull at this point, it's because there is potential that Tyler slips his elbow line by framing against my knees and pulling back. And he could slip that out. So I'm pulling in and I'm creating that hip angle here. And that's what's gonna generate the braking pressure. So he rolled through, we bring both knees back to the sky, and you can see I'm really applying a lot of pressure to pull that arm. It's hard for Tyler to hitchhike here or sit up. If he were to hitchhike, it'd be very easy for us to follow. So as he goes to turn, I can bring my knees back to the ground and start coming up to a forward position here. So wherever we are, we can track his arm here. As long as I keep my knees tense to the sky. If Tyler goes for the hitchhiker again, I bring my knees together and we can start to create braking pressure here. So depending on where Tyler is, depends on which hip I try to pop the arm up. If I'm turning belly down, I'm going back to that left principle. So I'm bringing it over this inside hip, and that's going to create braking pressure. If Tyler forward rolls through, I need to bring the elbow over my outside hip here to generate that braking pressure. But again, what's key is we maintain control wherever Tyler goes. So we're following basically what I was saying in that safety drill. So whenever I hit this omoplata, I'm still going to be giving him that time to tap. So as Tyler rolls through, we created that tension here. We get the break. Whichever direction he goes, if he turns to hitchhiker, I back heel and follow him up. And we create that braking pressure here. If he forward rolls here, I bring my knees into his head. So if he's trying to sit up, he's coming into the armbar. If he goes for a hitchhiker, we can follow him here. So we can track that arm wherever it goes. So let's look at it again. We start shooting the triangle. Tyler dips his head, and we start bringing our feet through to the far side. So we can't rip it out too easily. If I'm transferring to the armbar, I secure that wrist and thumb control, and I back heel here and keep my feet crossed. So wherever Tyler goes, very, very easy for me to track him here. You can see we can generate that braking pressure very easy. So basically, if I'm transitioning from omoplata to armbar, it's going to feel like a very shallow armbar. So when I say pull the wrist, I really want you to emphasize pulling that in, because quite often what happens is when we have 2 feet under the shoulder, sometimes that elbow line slips. Obviously, we can apply pressure to the forearm. Chances are that pressure is going to slip. Guys, we've covered a ton of upper body submissions from the knee shield or Z-guard. Now we're going to work our way into some lower body submissions. And we just covered the omoplata. And what better place to start than the omoplata, because the most common defense to an omoplata is a guy to place his knee on your chest, posture, and rip his arm out. Most common defense for no-gi, which gives us the scoop grip, which will bring us straight into a 50-50 K-guard style entry. I will not cover this in great detail. You will find this covered extensively on systematic submission dilemmas. So I don't want to rehash the same stuff, but I'm going to give you the most basic, most simple solution from this position. We're also going to cover a way to take the back if you want leg lock inclined, right? So let's take a look. Let's say we've set up our omoplata, right? So if Tyler just tries to lift his head and try to rip his arm out, it can be pretty heavy. Obviously, explosive guys can do this, or if it's very slippery, it can do this. But the most common way they're going to rip their arm out is they're going to create a counterforce on our body here. So we're going to place that knee on our chest, and then they're going to use that to pin our hips to the ground while they rip their arm out. And why that's so good is because if the knee wasn't on the ground and he's trying to rip his arm out, if I have any form of attachment, you see my hips follow him. My weight follows him off the ground. So when he puts his knee on my chest, it creates a pin on my hips, a counterforce, so they can rip his arm clean out. But what that does is it gives us a scoop grip, right? So we've hit the omoplata and he places the knee on the chest. So I can come through and take a solid scoop grip on this leg. So now when he rips his arm out, we can transition straight into leg attack. So we'll change the angle slightly. So knee on the chest. We turn that knee on the chest into a scoop grip, and I slide my knee into the pocket here. We got our scoop grip. We reinforce foot over foot. Why do we do this? So Tyler cannot turn to face us here. I keep applying pressure into him. And ideally, I apply pressure in such a way his hands end up on the floor. They end up preoccupied. From here, we can do our basic 50-50 entry. So I throw my outside leg over the top, and we back heel here. And we can control from this position here. If Tyler remains still and just tries to rip his leg out, he's going to find that it's completely wedged by my lower leg. So we can quickly transition to stuffing his 50-50 foot over the top to secure the heel. I don't finish on my hip here. It's actually quite hard to generate braking pressure here. Ideally, I secure the heel and we roll belly down. So now it's very easy for me to apply braking pressure But the main reason we apply braking pressure belly down is because if I expose the heel here and I start to apply pressure, Tyler can backstep. And when he backsteps, he can reach for my elbow. Once he has elbow control, he can slip the heel. If we come back, we can go belly down, and now Tyler tries to backstep, he breaks his own leg. So the beauty of a belly down 50-50 finish is that there's no way Tyler can backstep without injuring himself, which is actually what happened in the Ryan Hall BJ Penn match. A lot of people miss the subtlety, but because Ryan Hall was belly down, BJ broke his own leg backstepping. Had Ryan Hall stayed on the hip, BJ Penn would have been able to backstep and control the elbow. So let's take a look at it one more time. We hit our little platter, we place the knee on the chest, we turn that into a scoop grip, and now we allow him to rip his arm out. I take this anchor, knee inside knee, and the foot is an anchor on the hip here. My outside leg reinforces, but we push them onto their hands here. So I apply pushing pressure forward so that I can throw my leg over the top. I cross my feet and back heel, so if Tyler tries to rip his leg out, his knee's stuck. And the beauty is I wait till he tries to rip it out, and then I quickly pass it across. If I try to pass it across while he's ripping his leg out, we could potentially lose control in the slipperiness. So I pass it across, secure the heel. I momentarily open my feet so that I can use my lower leg to get belly down. Once we're belly down, we can apply pressure quite easily. So I just apply a lifting pressure on the heel. I'm trying to lift the heel, collapse the toes. And we apply that pressure to get the tap. And again, if Tyler were to explode into a backstep, he's gonna pop his own leg. So again, the most simple solution from that omoplata position is to take a scoop grip, turn it into a K guard, 50-50 entry.